When looking at the several executives who've been involved in running the Walt Disney Studios, I feel one who does not get enough credit is Ron Miller. While there were some bumps in the road, he also came up with ideas that would eventually help the studio's fortunes. But who was Ron Miller? A former professional football player, Miller first met Walt Disney when he began dating his daughter Diane, who he later married. His first position at the Disney Company was as an assistant director, but Walt felt he was better suited as a producer. He started off as an associate producer, before quickly getting his first producer credit on The Misadventures of Merlin Jones. Miller developed a close bond with Walt, had a keen idea of what he liked to see in the movies his company produced. One day that often stuck with Ron Miller was when they both held a screening of To Kill a Mockingbird. Walt loved the film and was disappointed his family image prevented him from releasing a movie with that subject matter. After Walt Disney died in 1966, Miller continued his duties at the company's film division, but still had to answer to the executives in charge. First, Walt's brother Roy, followed by eventual president Card Walker. Even though Walt was a huge believer in always moving forward and trying out new things, that was not how the post-Walt leadership operated. They stuck closely to the misguided belief of doing what Walt would have done, which to them meant not doing anything new or innovative at all. If anything, they seemed to regress in the live-action films being greenlit for production. In the 1950s and 1960s, most of the movies produced by the Disney Studios were classic adventure yarns, like 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and Swiss Family Robinson. These had appealed to a general audience, thanks to needed thrills and excitement. He also liked making movies involving animals, but these were hardly cutesy affairs. Movies like Old Yeller and The Incredible Journey had an edge to them, and showed the dangers of the wilderness. Disney did greenlight comedies, but even films like The Absent-Minded Professor and The Love Bug were able to balance the occasional silliness of the premise with enough sophistication and wit for everyone to enjoy. Walt Disney did not always hit it out of the park every time, but he still had a keen understanding of what the audience wanted. The people that ran the company after his death appeared to put a heavy focus on goofy over-the-top comedies and vanilla animal pictures. These were films with titles like The Biscuit Eater, The Castaway Cowboy, $1 Million Duck, and The Cat from Outer Space. On his podcast, Escape from Walt Disney, Tony Goldmark has referred to these 70s Disney productions as Troy McClure movies, because they sound exactly like the kinds of films McClure would have mentioned starring in on The Simpsons. Occasionally they would release a gem like Escape to Witch Mountain or The Apple Dumpling Gang, but these were drowned out by the feature-length sitcoms and inoffensive family movies that now carried the Disney name. While the rest of Hollywood was entering a bold new era by bringing in filmmakers of exciting visions like George Lucas, Francis Ford Coppola, Steven Spielberg, and Martin Scorsese, Disney remained stagnant. They employed the same stable of directors, and there was not much interest in catering beyond the family crowd, and this seriously affected their grosses. The few major consistent successes Disney did have during the 70s were with their animated films. Whether it was a new movie like Robin Hood or The Rescuers, or a re-release of one of their classics, Disney could usually count on those to do well. Nonetheless, they lost the teenage and adult audience, and Ron Miller grew frustrated as he tried to convince Walker and his board to prove edgier, more interesting fare that would bring in patrons beyond children and their parents. He was finally able to make his case when two big hits were released in 1977, Star Wars and Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Both of these, made by directors inspired by the Disney films of their childhood, succeeded in appealing to a general audience and provided the awe, amazement, and wonderment that the Disney brand used to be known for. Close Encounters even included a tribute to Pinocchio by sampling a portion of When You Wish Upon a Star in the score. Miller pointed to these two films as examples of the kinds of movies Disney should be making. Thus, he was finally given a bit more freedom with the projects the studio released. Among the first was the science fiction movie The Black Hole, notably the first Disney film released with a PG rating. It was not well received by critics and disappointed at the box office, but was nonetheless a sign that the Mouse House was now open to attracting a more mature audience. Miller continued putting into production other films that would lead the studio to a new era. There were the horror films The Watcher in the Woods and Something Wicked This Way Comes, as well as the risque comedies Midnight Madness and The Devil Max Devlin. The last one became controversial for, get this, casting Bill Cosby as the devil. Disney also teamed up with Paramount on two films, Popeye and Dragon Slayer, with Disney handling the international distribution. That's not to say Disney did not occasionally turn down films they thought were too mature. Robert Zemeckis tried pitching Back to the Future to Disney, but was rejected because the executives were turned off by the storyline of a mother falling for her own time-traveling son. The most ambitious movie produced by Disney during this period was Tron, which involved the then innovative use of computer animation. With Walt having a major interest in technology, I think that film's story of a video game developer being transported inside the computer would have definitely appealed to his sensibilities. And without the existence of Tron, we probably would not have gotten Toy Story and all the other wonderful Pixar films later on. Unfortunately, many of these movies did not do particularly well at the box office, and Miller reasoned that the problem was that too many associated the Disney name with children's entertainment, and that it was losing potential viewers who might like Tron and Watcher in the Woods. So he decided to create a new label where the studio could release these sorts of movies that did not necessarily fit with people's perception of Disney. As a result, Touchstone was born, with Ron Howard's Splash being the first release under that brand name. Its story of a man who falls in love with a mermaid was still very much in the Disney vein, but the humor was slightly more adult. While the movie did star Tom Hanks, he was not yet a box office draw at that point, and in fact it was only his second feature film credit. However, thanks to the charming romantic chemistry between Hanks and Daryl Hannah and its winning comedy, Splash was a hit, and being released as a Touchstone title rather than a Disney film probably helped. Miller continued with other ambitious ideas too. He acquired the rights to a book named Who Censored Roger Rabbit by Garrett K. Wolfe, which he felt was the perfect material for a movie that combined animation with live action. He also saw potential in a young animator named Tim Burton, recommended by two other executives, Julie Hickson and Tom Wilhite. Burton was working at Disney Animation, and while he clearly had a lot of imagination and creativity, it was obvious his talents were not quite the right fit for movies like The Fox and the Hound. His designs for The Black Cauldron were also rejected for being too strange. Burton was given $60,000 to create a stop-motion animated short titled Vincent, inspired by his admiration for Vincent Price. While Disney appreciated the effort, they weren't sure what to do with Vincent, and only played in a single Los Angeles movie theater. Nonetheless, production was approved on a live-action 30-minute short named Frankenweenie, about a boy who revives his dead dog. Ron Miller was also involved in the animation department, which at that point saw a new generation of animators and artists come in, and would provide ideas to the story team. For example, the character of Olivia, the young girl held by Basil Baker Street in The Great Mouse Detective, was Miller's suggestion. While all this was going on, Disney found itself under potential takeover threat. One company interested in potentially buying Disney was MCA, which was then the parent of Universal Pictures. So there's an alternate universe where Mickey Mouse and Woody Woodpecker wound up under the same umbrella. Had this deal gone through, Ron Miller would have been appointed president of MCA. In the end, the Disney board decided to bring in Frank Wells, Michael Eisner, and Jeffrey Katzenberg to run things, and Miller was booted out, partly due to their dissatisfaction with the box office grosses on the studio's recent movies. He then left the entertainment industry, although before being fired by Disney, he had already started a successful vineyard in Napa Valley with his wife Diane Disney Miller. After seeing Frankenweenie and much like Vincent not knowing what to do with it, Disney fired Burton as he was seen as a waste of company resources. Luckily, Paul Reubens watched his shorts and immediately hired him to direct Pee-wee's Big Adventure, launching a successful directing career. As for Touchstone Pictures, that ended up being one of Disney's biggest assets during the 80s, and helped their box office fortunes immensely, thanks to hits like Down and Out in Beverly Hills, Ruthless People, Three Men and a Baby, Adventures in Babysitting, Good Morning Vietnam, and Dead Poets Society. Who Censored Roger Rabbit was eventually completed as Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and directed by Robert Zemeckis with Steven Spielberg executive producing. That was another enormous hit for Touchstone Pictures. Disney's animated films also started making more money, eventually leading to mega successes like Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, and The Lion King in the 90s. Wells, Eisner, and Katzenberg were largely credited for these triumphs, but Miller deserves more appreciation for even starting Touchstone in the first place, and wanting to bring in new voices to the studio. He knew Disney films could be more than just ones parents could drop their children off at, and sought to innovate the studio much like his father-in-law Walt did. During a period when the Walt Disney Company was not thinking much about the future, Ron Miller fought to prove it had a bigger potential than the stuffy suits realized, and he deserves his place as an important contribution to its history. See you next time.